boosted in low-income households. And that's sort of our initial way into the matter. So we are not an energy organization, nor we are environmental organization. Our stake in this is, you see that building, those people in that buildings, and this is a picture from Yerevan, I believe, who cannot afford to pay their energy bills.
Besim, please, you are not yet sharing the presentation.
Are we not? Can you
see the slides?
No, right now you are not sharing the presentation.
Oh, it got me interrupted. Sorry.
No, don't worry.
Share screen.
Okay.
Okay, now we can see
now?
your screen. Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Sorry for the interruption. You may continue.
So, sorry for that. So our main concern are those people who live in those households who live in these buildings, and this is a picture from Yerevan, who cannot afford heating because the bills are high, and who cannot afford to have comfortable living because they are spending too much energy at a cost which is not affordable for them, which is sort of how we approach the issue of energy poverty. Having said that, a lot has been done over the years, and even more has been said regarding energy efficiency in buildings. But we felt when we started this approach in many of the countries where we have habitat programs that not too much has been done on residential buildings, primarily because it's complex, it's complicated, and we'll talk a little bit during this presentation at the beginning of why is it complicated and what makes it so difficult. So the starting point, the context is that a lot of the housing stock in the countries of Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, Caucasus, basically all countries which were part of the former socialist societies have a problem in common when it comes to the multi-apartment building stocks. They were all built at a time where energy was free. A lot of the stock was owned by the state, if not all, and there was very little care in the energy features of those buildings. And we're talking mostly about 50s, 60s, 70s, up to the 80s. In some of the countries, these buildings represent from 30 to 70% of the entire stock. So 30 to 70% of the households live in those buildings. What happened is that after the privatization of 1990, all of these countries adopted with some degree of difference, but all of them privatized entirely the stock for basically in a way that tenants or people who lived in them got to buy them at a reduced price. They consume a large percentage of total energy, and they're responsible for a chunkable degree of emissions which come from the residential sector. What has happened is that they are, because of the high level of payment and low level of living standards, especially for a lot of the households in these buildings, they have become a major issue in terms of poverty, in terms of the social status of these buildings. So we consider this a housing issue. It has energy repercussions, it has health repercussions, it has environmental repercussions, social repercussions, but to us it's a housing issue. And with this in mind, we started working in a number of these countries, and in this map you could see more or less what is the number of, or what are those regions where we're looking at the issue. As I said, there are multiple challenges and they are intertwined. and they belong to different sectors. Usually in the programs for energy, people with energy backgrounds participate, and they try to address the issue through energy means or energy policies and energy incentives. And they are valid and important to have in mind, because that's what the problem is. But they should be viewed from a wider perspective, because they are not the only challenges. So the energy challenges, as you can see in the screen, are pretty much known to everybody, I believe, who is in this webinar. We'll look a little bit at the housing. The very fact that 90% of individual ownership of these collective buildings, which were built basically at a time when they were owned, managed, and maintained by the state, with decision-making from the state. If you know the former ZEGs in the Soviet system, or the Kuchni Saveti in the ex-Yugoslav system, or SIZ, they were not replaced with efficient decision-making, management, and maintenance structures following the 90s, which led to basically these buildings deteriorating further, even though to begin with they had very poor energy features, because they were mostly built at a time where nobody cared about the energy features.
Sorry to interrupt
did you lose the screen?
Yes, we lost your screen. Could you please share it again?
Share screen. I saw it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there it is again.
Okay.
Okay, it's back.
So in addition to energy challenges, there are housing challenges and regulatory and legal challenges, where basically the laws and regulations are insufficient. There are gaps in which the obligations and rights of tenants living in an apartment block are regulated, which causes that nobody takes initiative, nobody inspects, nobody wants to invest, etc., which is deteriorating further the living conditions within those buildings. Typically, this would mean that entire building blocks have unreplaced windows, no cleaning, no lighting, etc., and this you can see in many countries to various levels of severity. Social problem, affordability for low-income levels in a building. You can find many households which either don't heat themselves, and February is typically the month with highest heating bills, or they use a fraction of their space in the house. So they heat one room or two rooms, and they do it on shifts, so as they can save money, or basically heat themselves as much as it's affordable, and usually it's not affordable. Lack of subsidies to target low-income households. If you want to do a building renovation, you still have to have in mind that there is no full social stratification in these buildings, as there is in the West. So there are people with lower levels of income living along people with higher levels of income. And in order for any investment to be made, there need to be 66%, 51%, 75% vote of the tenants, which is not feasible given the structure of the inhabitants. Market. These are multi-million or multi-billion costs to start with, because it's a generational project. These are all buildings which were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s need to be brought to the standards of efficiency in terms of energy use and decency in terms of housing use to the 2018 standards, and that costs a lot of money. And we're talking about a whole city or a whole neighborhood or even a whole country. So it is obvious that state budgets are not going to subsidize the whole intervention. We're talking about, let's say, to repair all the buildings like this in Macedonia would take €1 billion. It is not possible to, you can expect that the Macedonian government, and I use Macedonia as an example here, will fund it, but that's not very likely to happen given the economic situation of these countries. So there must be some scalability and replicability that uses market and capital, and funding which combines subsidy and capital. However, no bank wants to work with homeowner associations in these countries, typically in the Balkans and the Caucasus, for two reasons. First, because they are considered risky, and secondly, because they haven't done it before, and usually banks don't do things that they haven't done before. They are not the most revolutionary sector. Environment, a high percentage of contribution of CO2 comes from the residential sector, and I know all of these countries have strategies of addressing CO2. However, they very little, to a very little extent, deal with residential sector. The point we're trying to make is without addressing residential sector, you're not going to get far enough in reducing CO2 emissions and the government commitments that are related to that with various international EU and UN obligations. However, it must be noted that the housing or residential sector is to a great extent the single highest contributor in local pollution, which is a hot topic in a number of countries, especially in Bosnia, Kosovo, and Macedonia these days, because they are the single highest contributor to PM5 and PM10 in some studies. It's a debatable question, but nobody will say that there is no connection between these two problems. So when we look at the residential energy use, we look at a wide net of interaction between different public, private, commercial, and state institutions, which need to be pretty much working together so that the issue is solved, which we believe is the reason why nobody wants to address, or very little has been done, because it's a complex net of people who speak different languages and care for different policy aspects of the problem. We believe that this ecosystem, as we call it, and introduce it, which involves all of these linkages, should be also facilitated by a party which wants to address the issue. So in our approach within REELIH and outside in the other projects, we try to play the role of facilitator of the ecosystem, to bring basically various supply side and demand side players together, and to bring the condominium owners or the homeowner associations as the main decision-making body. And during the next 10-15 minutes, we'll talk a little bit of how we do that and what are our experiences. I did mention a little bit in the various comments I made that it's difficult to bring these players together. They're not used to working, homeowners are not used to working together. They don't have necessarily a culture of self-organization for the maintenance and management of their own property. They look at their own apartment as a property rather than the whole building as a joint property. And this causes, coupled with issues of not precise laws and obligations, which outline the obligation of homeowners and homeowner association, make it very difficult to work in this sector. So we believe that the most vigorous challenge is not the absence of technology or supply of materials, construction, and what have you, but the right institutional structure that would set large-scale energy efficiency measures in motion. In other words, we have technology, we don't have people working together, institutions understanding each other, and commercial and banking sector willing to invest and make money out of this sector. So what we did in REELIH, and now we're moving into REELIH, is we tried to demonstrate what in the current state of affairs is doable and sort of use that as an advocacy tool and a market development tool. So we started off with 4 pilot buildings completely refurbished in 4 cities in Bosnia, and this was back in 2013-14. right? Just to show that it's doable. We didn't subsidize these buildings because we want to do demonstrations projects which are close enough to the scalability and replicability. Meaning, if there was no foreign intervention such as ours or yours, because you belong to development organization, this can still happen solely through homeowner association. We call it, our pilot buildings or demonstration buildings should be as little as possible on steroids, so that they can be replicable. So the financial model here is a combination of municipal subsidy, homeowners associations, and loans from bank, with what was available at that moment. So we wanted to demonstrate that it is possible to renovate some buildings. Then we went a little bit on a macro level. So we took one canton, which is the Tuzla canton, and we recorded through our partner Enova in Bosnia, all 973 residential buildings in that canton, and measured their energy features. Then we interviewed 1,200 households, or 10% of the people who live in these buildings. And then we did rough measurements, estimates of each of these buildings. And then we came to a conclusion that we could potentially save up to for that figure in terms of energy use from the residential sector of those 973 buildings. On basis of that, we lobbied, and we advocated that the Tuzla canton brings a policy, which is the Tuzla canton. It's a 5-year plan to finance and support actions in energy efficiency of buildings, residential buildings, and to put a budgetary contribution in the budget. Okay? This is one of those 4 buildings. It's a small building, as you can see. This is more or less the process we used to build a cantonal policy. So we photographed these buildings, we did measurements, data processing. Actually, our partner Enova in Bosnia did this analysis of results, and then we created a 3D model and database, and we made some cost estimates, and etc., etc. So can you, Denisa, so basically the link here, and Denisa will help me to put it on screen, is one of these 13 cities. Can you see this? This is a question. Can somebody tell me if you
can? Besim,
yes.
It can be seen. No problem.
Okay, so this is the city of Banovići. These are real buildings in the city of Banovići in Bosnia, right? And they're photographed, so they're actual, and there's actual measurements for each one of them. I'm going to click which were taken from the measurement, which is pretty much how much energy they use in kilowatt hours, what are the facade and other technical measurements, what are the current consumption of CO2, the current emission of CO2, NOx and SO2, etc. And then also for that building, there is estimates of how much it would cost to make the intervention. Same goes for the other buildings. So for each building, even there are some buildings which are the same, they have somewhat different measures because various conditions of the buildings were taken into account. That's the link. You can actually use it. We use this as an advocacy tool because it's easier to explain in this way than through a document to the government, right? And basically, this is how it looks. Then the government of Tuzla Canton adopted action plan, and then we are working with a couple more cantons to do this. Last year they put $150,000, and it is coupled with municipal funding, so there is some subsidy line created for the first time. First buildings have been renovated through this model. In Armenia, we did something different because it's a different altogether context. And I'm not going to go too much in detail. You can go through those questions probably. But we set up a scheme with the municipality of Yerevan in which there is a cooperation with Inecobank, which is a commercial bank, to make small-scale renovations because there's no affordability for large-scale renovations of common space in which there would be a 60%, 40% match, which means that the municipality will match with 40% a bank loan of 60%. These are the numbers that we are looking at. Basically, municipality of Yerevan now is looking into financing a little bit more of these buildings. We have yet to do a full intervention in Armenia because the conditions are not ripe to do that using a market-based model because of affordability reasons, but also because the law on homeowner association is not as precise and as concise as it should be. So it's still, very few banks would want to work large interventions, and there are questions with affordability. Yeah, this is the staircases. So basically we focus on the common areas of the buildings and try to improve those, bringing some level of energy savings. I'm not going to speak about the Macedonia case because it's yeah, we don't have the time for that, but we started this project in 2009 in Macedonia with cooperation with USAID, and it's one of the 3 countries where we try to demonstrate things. We use this project as a platform, and then we try to connect it with Central Europe. Why? Because it had exactly the same problem, and it still does in a large extent. It has joined the EU in the meantime, so there are some things moved there faster than in this region, but it went through similar projects and similar challenges. So we try to use the best practices from them, and what we did is we conducted a research which compared 4 countries in Central Europe, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia, and their policies and conditions, and this was done by by a research company in Hungary, which we collaborate with MRI. So basically they documented learnings from those programs. They gave us some policy recommendations, and we developed certain level of advocacy approach on a regional scale, but it also feeds our advocacy on a national scale to inform policies and practices in these countries. This is all my colleague Zita will take over from here. Our regional research on the subsidy schemes are published in the website, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail. And on basis of that, we develop certain recommendations for Armenia and Bosnia on residential energy efficiency. Zita?
Okay, so I will continue after Besim. Hi, this is Zita. I will speak more about advocacy side and our policy recommendations, and I will show you a little bit of regional level of advocacy that we do in this project. So based on our projects, demonstration projects, work on the ground, based on our research and all the comparisons that we did, we developed a policy paper where we collected all our policy recommendations for residential energy efficiency in Eastern Europe. I will show you several of those. There is an overarching one, and Besim already mentioned this. This is a complex system. However, we think that the homeowners should be in the center, and as these are privately owned apartments, and without the decision of the homeowners, not much can happen. So this needs to be, taken into consideration when creating a big residential energy efficiency refurbishment programs or projects. And these recommendations are mainly addressed to the international organizations working in this field, trying to make the market working, and also they are for the national governments trying to set up policies and residential energy efficiency programs. We think that one of the crucial things when setting up these programs is that there must be a clearly set law on creating the homeowner associations. So it must be it must be a legal body, and for each building there should be homeowner associations. There must be clearly set management and maintenance obligations for the homeowners and for the homeowner associations, and they should take into consideration the energy efficiency, of course. Another very important recommendation is there must be a financing system, financing mechanism made and affordable for these homeowner associations. So our recommendation, basically the market should be developed in a way that the banks are willing to lend the money to the homeowner association as a collective body. Of course, as Besim mentioned, there must be a cooperation of public authorities, of a municipality or a government body. We think there must be subsidies, especially targeted for the low-income homeowners, so the investment is more affordable and attractive, of course, especially at the introductory phase. Also, based on all our research and comparisons and best practices from the Central and Eastern European countries, we found that there was a good practice, and this should be also set by the law, that each homeowner association should have a fund of maintenance, where basically this fund would be set in a commercial bank, so that the bank would see the flow of financing, and it would kind of de-risk the lending. And also, as it was mentioned, we think that it's really important to ensure the facilitation of this complex ecosystem of stakeholders, because these are, as Besim mentioned, these are really different actors that need to work together. They speak different languages, and there must be a stakeholder or actor that would bring all of this together, help the homeowners, of course, because they are the most important actor. And as I said, we put all of this into a policy paper. This policy paper is available online. I will show you where you can find it. And this is our main message, that this is not, of course, energy policy is very important, but this issue cannot be solved solely by energy policies. It needs to be a combination of housing, social, and energy policies. So as you could see the map at the beginning, this problem is a regional problem. So it's not a problem of just one country. It's very similar for several countries. And this is a huge territory, basically, and a huge problem. So we are trying to address it regionally as well, as you could see with the policy paper, but we organize regional conferences. We organized one last April in Brussels, where we presented our policy recommendations. We brought together basically these different kind of actors from the ecosystem of stakeholders. So we had the banks, financial bodies, we had public authorities from the national governments, we had European bodies there, had NGOs and researchers. And we go to other regional conferences, trying to set panel sessions, present the issue, trying to work with other organizations on this. And part of this, big part of our regional advocacy is a knowledge sharing, because we believe it's really important to share the knowledge. And we believe that we cannot do this alone. Of course, we need partners, and we need other organizations and partners to share the knowledge with. And that's why also we created a website. The website is called getwarmhomes.org. Can you see the website?
Yes, it can be seen, Zita. Don't worry.
Perfect. So basically in this website, we just show our approach. Then if you can scroll down. So we present the projects and we present also how we see the problem and what is the problem. Maybe I can.
It's very, we try to use this.
Okay. Also, we use this as this is a knowledge sharing. So maybe I need a mouse. Sorry, guys. So we have a part called resources here, and this might be really interesting for you. We try to put here all our resources, but as well external resources, so not just our resources. Everything connected to residential energy efficiency. And you can, of course, you can find here the policy paper. It's featured here, but you can find here all kinds of other research, policy papers. I think this is really helpful. Another very important feature is the policy part. We try to list here and write all kinds of articles of policy initiatives happening in this field. So this might be interesting, and we welcome any external inputs. So if you would have an interesting article for us, we have here we have a blog section, and we welcome any external writers. You don't need to be a writer, of course, but anyone who is interested in this topic and has anything interesting to share, we are willing to give you a floor. We would be more than happy. And also, so this is kind of a regional English website, and we have created 2 other websites, national websites. One is targeting Bosnian population, is in Bosnian, and these websites are a little bit different. They are targeting the homeowners, and these websites are really, they are serving the purpose of showing the homeowners why it is important to do residential energy efficiency, what kind of benefits it can bring, and it's showing also step by step to the homeowners how they can do residential energy efficiency refurbishments, and they can go basically step by step from how to make decisions in homeowner associations, what kind of interventions they can do, so maybe a full facade, maybe just the windows, maybe just the roof. Then there is a step of how to finance it, and then the last step is to construct. So you can go here and you can see this is a step by step. Also, very nice resource here is the stories. So we feature here the stories of the pilot buildings that we did, and these are the personal stories of the people that went through the energy efficiency refurbishment of their buildings. So this is basically raising awareness. This is serving also the purpose to raise awareness about the issue and what can be done about the issue. And we have basically the same website in Armenian for Armenians. Okay, we can. Another part of our residential energy efficiency, and I will finish here, is of our residential energy efficiency regional advocacy, is that we are just starting to set up a community of practice. This is a special community of practice for residential energy efficiency in Eastern Europe, so all the issues we presented right here. And this community of practice is serving the purpose, of course, to share knowledge, to do a research together, to share any kind of research, to cooperate on a project. So anyone who would be interested, please contact us, either me or Besim. We put here our contacts. We would be more than happy to have you. And I think this is the end.
This was our last slide, and I would like to thank you for your attention. And we are looking for, we have yet to see the questions because we were looking at this.
Yes. Thank you very much, Besim and Zita. Fantastic presentation, honestly. And well, indeed, we already have a few questions. Anyone who is interested, please write your question in the chat box, as I stated at the very beginning. But we have the first question, which states within the presentation: did measures and interventions in Bosnia and Herzegovina include only windows and walls, or also heating technology?
No, they didn't include heating technology. They included facade, windows, and roof.
Okay, it was part of a preliminary decision regarding the context, or what exactly happened?
Sorry, I didn't hear. Can you repeat the question?
It was part of a preliminary decision to not include the heating technology for any particular reasons?
Because of the fuel source, right? So basically, if it's a district heat, you use gas. Some buildings, they use district heating, and in some cases people just use wood. So you would have to address that issue through regulatory mechanisms. We were trying to address the issue through basically of how much heat leakage happens through the facade, roof, and windows, without really going into the heating decisions, because that would require negotiating with the utility company. And we used pilots in places which had independent heating sources, so that as to incentivize saving. Because if people pay bill which is not connected with consumption, and such is the case in certain places where it's a flat fee for utility company, then they are not incentivized to save. I don't know if that answers the question, but in these particular pilots, we didn't change the heating technology.
Okay, thank you very much, Besim. Another question. One of the challenges in assessing private funding for renovations is availability of collateral or mortgage vis-a-vis loans. How these issues were solved in the countries you worked? Was there a state guarantee for bank loans? Were regular building maintenance fees used as security for banks?
Yes, that's the billion-dollar question. If we had the answer to this question right now, we wouldn't have the problem. And that's actually our, let's say, marker in terms of where replicability and scalability starts. When basically banks look at homeowner association as they look at it as a viable partner, right? Or a viable client. And that hasn't happened in the Balkans, but it has happened in Central Europe some 10, 15 years ago, right? In which basically banks don't collateralize with the value of the property when they give loans to homeowner associations, but they've developed that. We use some of these comparative examples these homeowner associations don't own the building, but they own the responsibility to manage it. So there should be some alternative forms of guarantee, which do include state guarantee, I agree, because that's a way to sort of de-risk. And in some countries, we are trying those methods on a pilot scale. Okay, so yeah, that's basically banks don't see how the homeowner association could be made to repay, and we are trying to convince them that there are ways in which this can be addressed, especially in buildings which have a history of 90+% payment over the past 5 years. They have a collateral in terms of the maintenance fund. There are certain subsidy lines from the municipality. We try to combine those in an investment project. Okay.
Indeed, I understand. The next question states, social policies can be a motivator or a barrier to improving energy efficiency in residential buildings. For example, energy subsidies could reduce interest of low-income families in participating in renovations. How these issues were addressed in your target countries?
Yes, too much subsidy can kill the market because you will have what you call waiters, right? You see that in Bulgaria right now, because there's huge 100% subsidy program funded by EU, and that's creating a situation. Obviously, as I said, there is no way in which the amount of this funding will cover the whole problem for the next 20 or 30 years. Yeah? So it creates a situation where people are hesitant or they are waiting for their turn, and that's not a good thing. So we are trying to assess two things. First, subsidy for those, and that's why we call it targeted subsidy, who really cannot afford, such as, or are not interested, such as retired people living in them. It's, you know, they have the income to invest, right? So subsidy should target only those who cannot afford, not those who afford, the middle class or the rich people who live in the same building. Also, it shouldn't be too high to discourage people from taking loans. And that varies from context to context and from, you know, basically this is why we do interview, we look at the household's income and try to set up parameters of what is right level of subsidy. And please don't confuse this with subsidy which is connected with increasing demand, such as the rebates, because sometimes, you know, you subsidize the interest rate or you give certain subsidies so that people take up the loan, and that's what happens as well. We're talking about income-based subsidy. Does that answer?
Yes, most certainly, Besim. The next question is the following. Is energy poverty approached as a winter season related issue or as a winter heating plus summer cooling issue?
Energy poverty is usually not approached in these countries, or is approached in a very populistic way by giving vouchers for electricity bills for poor people, right? So there are not real measures of energy poverty. There are not even standard definitions of who lives in energy poverty, nor a comprehensive understanding of what are and where are those people living. So we believe that there are many people, many more people living in energy poverty rather than in classical measurements of poverty, because more people cannot afford heating at the right cost, which is kind of the definition for energy poverty. It is both of course, it's much more a winter problem than a summer problem in a four-season climate, such as the one in continental Europe.
Okay, thank you. The next question says the following. Did you include any conditionality to access or to facilitate access to funding, like keeping rental prices or relocating inhabitants while the renovations are conducted in order not to support gentrification?
So, Maite, in all of these countries, in most of these countries, there are owner-occupied apartments, because, as I said in the presentation, 90+% was abruptly and immediately privatized in the 90s, right? So in 91, 92, there were mass privatization laws in all of these countries. So that makes it a very different situation from Western Europe, right? Where there is still a lot of stock owned by either investors or semi-state institutions or state, which can be put in the social rental market. So in effect, we don't have social rental markets in these countries, and we have either private unregulated rental markets or high level of owner occupancy. So most cases, these people are the same building. Does that answer the question?
So it did not spur gentrification in any way. I mean, they didn't move because their houses were more valued afterwards. This was not the case then.
Well, if it's their only property, it may have the value, but they live in it, right? So they don't want to give up. They're in their 80s, let's say. The apartment is in the city center, but they have a very low income because of the pension, right? So they can't afford heating their house. And that's a very, it's a typical situation. And so for them, it's not an investment, and they're not willing to give up the house because I'm just giving a scenario. So very few of the people actually who live in these buildings are renting them, because everybody tries to own in Eastern Europe and in Southeastern Europe, or at least that's the culture. So the question of be very important in the context of Western Europe does not.
Besim?
I mean, yes.
Yes. No, we lost you for a second there.
So the issue, keeping rental prices or relocating inhabitants, these are not interventions where you need to relocate inhabitants. And the rental prices, as I said, they don't affect because there is 90+% owner occupancy in these buildings.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And we have another question. What is your experience in supporting the energy efficiency of public buildings, particularly schools and preschools?
We are a housing organization, so we deal with residential buildings. So basically our mission, the reason why we exist, is to work with housing and shelter related issues. So we don't normally go into public buildings. However, we are implementing a project in the city of Viken, Spitak, in Armenia, working with the municipality, and it's an EU-funded project where we actually engage in demonstration and action planning, very much similar to the Tuzla model, where we also look at some of the public buildings. But that's a very unusual situation for us as Habitat because we are a housing organization.
Indeed, okay, perfect, Besim. Well, we are actually reaching the very end. I don't know if we have any further questions from other participants. Just in any case, as a note, in the meantime, as you might have all seen, this presentation has been recorded. There was a question related to if it's going to be uploaded. Yes, the presentation, both the recording and the slides, will be uploaded to our website. We will be informing all of you later today or tomorrow morning on where to find the presentation, so to watch it again if needed so, as well as the PPT slides.
Yeah, I think there's a follow-up question
yes,
from Maite.
Reformulating the question then, did you witness any gentrification trend after the renovations? People selling their houses because they have a higher price in the market?
We haven't seen a trend of gentrification because these are demonstration projects. I mean, we've done 45 buildings in Macedonia, 10-ish in Bosnia, and some in Armenia. So it's not a big enough group to look at trends. But we have witnessed an increase because we use control buildings and intervention buildings, which are same. We have witnessed a increase of the property value because basically, and in the way that bank evaluates that as collateral. So the answer to increase of property value, yes. And I think that's a selling point for homeowners, more than the question of energy efficiency, which is a technical one. Most people don't necessarily understand or care for it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Besim. And well, we have pretty much reached the end of the webinar. Unless we, yes. So once again, we wanted here from the LEDS-EEP express our immense gratitude to Besim and Zita and Denisa from Habitat for Humanity. And to everyone that has participated. I don't know if Besim or Zita has any final thing that they would like to say.
Yes, I would like, I mean, our colleague and friend, this is a project that we do with USAID support and funding, but also with a lot of support in the implementation. Our friend Andrew Popelka could not make it today. He sends apologies. He's somewhere in Serbia traveling, but this is just for the record, this is a project that we implement with their full support and from the Eurasia Energy Group in DC, but also from some of the missions in these demonstration countries. Thank you, Tor, for the support, and to all of the people involved in setting this up, and the participants, of course.
Thanks to you, Besim, Denisa, and Zita for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for being present here, and we'll keep you informed as soon as we have uploaded the presentations to the website. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.